My name is Austin Wadlington, and this is my presentation on plant diseases caused by nematodes. First, I'm going to talk about nematodes in general. Nematodes are from the Animalia kingdom, and they're like a worm type species that can excuse me, that can infect many different plants. They live in the soil of fields that we plant crops in now, and there's many of them in the soils that we have. And they can infect many different crops that we have in our area, such as corn, soybeans, cotton. Several hundred types of nematodes are out there that can feed on living plants and cause many different diseases in living plants. Depending on the conditions of the field that the nematodes are in, you could have contribution of the nematodes causing at least up to a 11% loss in yield. Even though there are many different types of nematodes, they're very widespread, and we still can't see them. You can't see them unless you look under a microscope at them. We can only see the effects that they have on the crops that we have and the plants that are in our area. Like, some things you could see causing the problems could do with weeds and insects. Nematodes are somewhat kind of transparent. You can almost see through them on the microscope. They're long, smooth bodies. They kind of real slender and real long, and they kind of just look like a worm underneath a microscope. The nematodes usually find their way into the soil, and then that's where they reproduce and hatch eggs. And the life cycle of the nematode can happen as quickly as 2 weeks. So you could have a nematode that comes into your field, and a week later it can reproduce and produce more, and that nematode dies. And this cycle can continue all throughout the growing season and even in the winter in your soils. That's just kind of an image of what the nematodes look like, just to give you an idea. You can kind of tell that they got just kind of look like a worm. Some of the symptoms you could see from nematodes, as many as there are, you can see symptoms in the roots like root rot, root nodules forming on your plants, and they could be beneficial or non-beneficial root nodules. You could also see symptoms above the soil surface and not just on the roots, and this would be like stunting of your plants and plants not reaching the potential size that they're at or the size they should be. Another thing, foliar symptoms that you would see is you'd see yellowing of the leaves, and plants, like I said just a second ago, plants would be stunted due to the lack of nutrients that are being cut off to the plant from the damage of the nematode. Root knot nematode is one that you can see all throughout the world, and it's one that we have a decent amount of problems with around here. The damage of root knot nematode is done by the swelling of the roots, and it can affect the plant in many different ways. The roots will swell up, and they won't be able to spread throughout the soil and find the different nutrients and the water that they need. You could also see stunted plants in corn and soybeans. You'd see, at some points you could even see, like in your soybeans around the time of pod fill, some of the pods would be smaller. You wouldn't have as many. You'd also see your corn cobs not forming as many kernels as they should. Some of the kernels will be half full, or some not even be full at all. This disease can be controlled by nematicide treatments, and some of the ways I've seen it used is a nematicide seed treatment that you put on when you buy your seed. That's just kind of what you would see in root knot nematode. That would be your regular roots, what they're supposed to look like, and then you could see the definite swelling on the ones that have been infected. Soybean cyst nematode is probably the biggest cause of yield loss in soybeans, and not just in the nematode side, but through all diseases. Some of the ways you could see soybean cyst nematode in your field is just like with normal nematodes, you'd have root damage, foliar damage, stunning of the plant, and plants not reaching mature growth. And you'd also see foliar damage, which would be because of the swelling of the roots and not being able to get the nutrients. Like some things you could see yellowing of the leaves because the roots aren't able to move through the soil and find the amount of nitrogen they need to produce the green leaves and allow the plant to produce all the sugars and proteins that it needs. That's kind of just a field view of soybean cyst nematode. You can kind of see it out there in the middle where they're just stunted plants and there's not really much of a soybean stand there. And that would be some of the nodules you'd see on the roots right there. All the little white spots, that'd be some of the causes of the root damage. Control of nematodes, even though there's so many of them all throughout the world, the control is kind of similar with all of them. Most conditions, nematicides will control it, in which we now have many out there due to scientific research and the studies that they've done on nematodes. Another thing that you could do is till your soils, because if you get in there and move the soils around, you could kill some of the nematodes in your soils. Another good way that you'd see nematode control it, which is mostly why we don't see nematodes in rice, is because you can flood the fields and the nematodes can't get the oxygen that they need. So really the only way you would see nematode damage in rice is if you're planting row rice, because typically rice is flooded.